And we are both on the screen from the very start. Hello, everybody in LinkedIn land and beyond, Twitch, YouTube, and all that kind of stuff. We're here on a Wednesday, 3 p.m. again.
Hello. Nice to see you. How is everybody? How are you, Toby?
I have a touch of the flu, so if I look clammy, that is why. But I have put on my best jacket to give the illusion that everything is okay, when actually I'm kind of falling apart a little bit inside. Cool. So we did our first live stream last week. We had loads of people in chat, which is great. So if there's anybody watching us again this week, you've come back for more, then say hello in chat. It's always good to know who is out there in listener land talking to us. I know Greg Arthur from Two Circle Studio has thoughts, so he said he would share them. So if, Greg, you do happen to drop in, do let us know and share your opinion. But the title of this week's stream is From BrewDog to Blind Spots, Leadership That Fails Employees, inspired by that kind of weird video that James Watt, former CEO of BrewDog, and his fiancée and entrepreneur, Georgia Toffolo, posted. Emily, what was that video? What was the theme of that video?
Well, it was two very clean people. They just look so clean. That was my first takeaway. Everything is so white and pristine in this video. Yeah, just talking about how they're going well, isn't it? Work-life balance is a myth. And actually, you should be striving for work-life integration because you should just love your work so much that it should be fully integrated into every single part of your life. They're entitled to their opinion. There was also, understandably, quite a bit of backlash on social media against this kind of notion that work should be the be-all and end-all of everything.
Yeah, they were doing some crazy stuff. Like, well, not necessarily crazy, but they were just working all out. Like they would just work all the time. Oh, we've got Dara and Ted joining us as well this week. Hello, our good friend Ted from PX Hub, and Dara, yeah, from Southern Indiana, who we've obviously spoken a few times before. I actually, talking of just like how cold America gets, like having spoken to a few people now about how cold it gets, I'm never going to complain about cold temperatures in the UK ever again. Like, it's on a different level. That aside, yeah, they position themselves as these individuals that just are loved. They love working, obsessed with working, and do it all the time, which is fine. Like, I'm not going to say don't do that. Each person is their own and can do it. But I think it becomes a really dangerous point when, if you are the leader of a company and that is how you act and maybe expect other people to act, that's when we get into a tricky situation, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think someone said to me once, no one is ever going to love your business like you love your business.
Mhm.
Like, speaking to anybody who is a founder out there, I don't know if there are any, but when you start your own business, it's your baby and you love it and you genuinely care about it and you put all the time and energy into it, and nobody else is ever going to do that to the same extent as you are. I think you just have to realize that now, and I don't think you should ever expect them to. There's a reason why you started your own business. So Toffolo and what's his name? James what?
James Watt.
What?
Yeah.
That's it. There needs to be called. Who's James Herriot? That's someone different.
James
James
Herriot is
Herriot.
someone different because he has a different name, but I don't know who I don't know who he
I
is.
think I know someone called James Herriot Watt. Which is confusing me. But anyway, that is an
Did he
aside.
also own a beer company? Because then that
No,
would be
I couldn't tell you. I'll have to go on a Google after this and let you know. Ramblings aside, yeah, so James Watt and Georgia Toffolo, they are, they have their own thing going and brilliant and wonderful for them, but no one else is going to care about it like you do. And this is a blind spot that business owners have.
Well, I think we were talking about this topic before. There are like 101 examples of leaders of companies doing the wrong thing. There are a few out there doing the right thing as well, but ultimately it leads with, and I suppose this is everything we're about, right? Is you've got to lead with empathy and understanding of
Yes.
why an employee turns up to work. I remember, I don't know if this is still a thing, right? That companies kind of go, "Oh, we want entrepreneurs or like internal entrepreneurs,"
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
like I even remember talking to someone. They went, "What the hell's an entrepreneur?" And I had to explain the concept. He went, "That's ridiculous." I was like, "Yeah, I know," but like I think that's kind of a fallacy, right? That doesn't happen. That's not a thing. Just because you want it doesn't mean it's a thing, right? That because you're getting to that point that you've just described, and you're expecting people to behave like it's their own company in that regard. And quite bluntly, employees probably aren't going to do that.
Well, I think some people might be like that. You can definitely, there is such a thing as a person who will innovate from inside a company. Whether you want to give it a fancy name because we like labels on things or not, those people will exist. Forcing everybody to fit into one mold is not going to exist. Their entrepreneurial spirit, whether you're inside or outside an organization, is not for everybody. Absolutely not.
Well, and we know that, and some of the people watching as well who set up their own businesses know that as well. That it's like you have to operate on a completely different level to being an employee. But what I would never underestimate is like I spent 15 years in employment plus, and it was right for me at the time and did what I needed to do. But employment, employment is a thing that's not really going to go away. So how do you design the most equitable relationship between employee and employer? Like it's surely it's finding out the nuances between what every individual within your company, why do they turn up? Why are they there? Because I can't remember his name now. Andrew Wood. He runs a company here in the UK called ESP Play.
The playgrounds people.
Playgrounds, and also owns an electrical company. But he's quite open and candid, and like some people are here because they want money, and we ask people if that's the case. I have a very open, honest conversation. Like, why are you here? Like, what is it? It may be career progression. It may be money. Maybe you want more money. It may be that you want, work-life balance. You want to be able to balance stuff. But what they do is they sit down and have individual conversations with people to tailor that employee experience. And I don't hear of that too often. I'm not saying it's easy either. And I think that, especially in larger organizations, to do that with 30,000 people would be difficult.
But also think about the back, like imagine you're an employee and maybe you've been there 2 months, maybe you've been there 2 years, and suddenly HR or your manager, they come to you. So why do you come to work? And if you just say, I come to work to get paid, like what impact is that going to have? You don't know what that's going to have on your chances of progression, because you might want to progress more because you might want to earn more money and you might change your reason of why you're there. I think it's very dangerous to set a lot of these things in process without really thinking and showing empathy and understanding it from the employee's experience.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I've seen it too often in conversations I've had, throughout my whole career, in the leaders kind of assuming what employees want and therefore delivering it. So, I worked for an organization that delivered like a new health insurance package to all the employees. Didn't ask anyone if they wanted it or needed it, but just went, "Oh, we're going to do that." I was like, "Okay, cool." I would have rather had the cash at that moment in time, because we were in recession times here in the UK, arguably still are. But that aside, it gets to the point where it's like, well, all that would have required is a conversation. And this company wasn't huge, right? This company was 10 people, so it's like it would have made sense to have just talked to people about this. And that's why I think it, like you say, right, it doesn't need to get lost in process. It's just in having conversations. However, can you build a culture where that happens? Like, how do you build a culture where that conversation is open and honest and happens on a regular basis?
I mean, that it's not easy. Definitely not easy. I think before we even come to how do you get to a conversation about how you can build that culture, I think first of all actually take a step back. Like, where do these blind spots and this lack of empathy, where does it come from?
Well, again, another organization I worked with, their founders were constantly saying, we want to design the company that we want to work for. That was their tagline that they would say to everyone. And you're like, that's fine, but you're designing the company you want to work for, not necessarily that everyone wants to work for. And if you do that, and go back to our DEI conversation last week, then you're only going to attract and retain the same type of people who are the same as you and think like you. That's the danger, right? In that you build like this echo chamber of similarity of people.
And just back to like real fundamental basics. What's the drama there? What's the problem with building a company with people that look like you? Because you can get stuff done because you're all in agreement.
Well, you just don't like I it just becomes a very bland organization that doesn't deliver anything for its people or its customers, because everything is designed and delivered from a very singular point of view, which is incredibly dangerous because, again, from an employee and a customer perspective, those relationships are multifaceted. So if you design from this one version of truth that may be across a number of people, you are limiting yourself as a business. So the more thought, the more diverse thought you have, experience you have in your organization, surely that's only going to transform itself into a better business.
Yeah, better for your customers, better for your product, better for everything. Good, cool, tick. We've got that.
So we're on there, but the easiest thing, the path of least resistance, is to hire people like you, because you don't then have to put any effort to kind of design an employee experience, because you're just like, well, we'll just design exactly how we want, and then we'll attract the people that we want who think like us, and we won't ever have to rock the boat. But you're never challenging yourself then either.
But also, people's situations change, right? You might hire people who start off working like you, and then in 3 years, one might have become a parent, one might have become a carer in another way, one might want to go down to part-time work, one might want to move, like, and then all these like different facts. You might have started off almost identical cookie cutter people, but then your situations and your life changes. So I don't really think you can even. I've just seen Greg's comment. Yeah, pretty much that, Greg. We are indeed piling in on BrewDog James's bonkers work forever or else promo. Let us know what you think about that. And essentially saying he's coming from a place of privilege. It basically sums up what the whole first 10 minutes have been about.
Well, which is kind of weird as well, because like he isn't rooted in privilege from his upbringing. He was the son of a fisherman in Scotland, and had very, from what I've read, humble roots. So, but that's got lost somewhere along the way. And I think we go back to Andrew Wood as an example, very humble roots, but seems to have maintained that. So, I mean, there's that old adage that like money kind of changes everything and how an individual behaves. But obviously he earned the right to get to that place of privilege, possibly. But it's when you then pile that expectation on the rest of the like in that video, and you just kind of go, I appreciate that you do that, and that's fine, but like I'm not gonna do that. I've got kids. James Watt also has children.
Yes, but didn't you hear they sit around the dinner table and they bounce off business ideas while they're eating dinner? I'm like, I'm trying to stop my 2-year-old from like throwing food everywhere, or getting down or having a panic attack because her beans are touching a potato or what have you.
Yeah, I and our children are obviously very similar ages. I think that's the thing. We have very, very. I'm not talking to them about freeformers, to be completely honest. I'm not going to get any sense.
I don't think they care.
Oh, we got a comment here from Sean. Everything he said was incredibly tone deaf, but he completely agrees with the concept, right? And I think that's the thing. Say whatever you want, but when it's delivered in such a tone deaf way where it doesn't appreciate that there may be a different perspective, because when you deep a little bit diver into it, when you dive a little bit deeper into it, James Watt has kind of got this bee in his bonnet about the UK economy not really being that great, and it kind of leads into that conversation that it's like, okay, the economy isn't doing great because people aren't working hard enough or long enough or busy enough and all that kind of stuff, which is very dangerous territory.
Yes, because unless you work in manufacturing or something where there is a really, 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 really clear measure of productivity, like number of units created, how do you measure productivity?
Cans of beer.
Well, for example, yeah. But how do you measure the productivity of your HR team, say, or any sort of knowledge workers? And that's I feel like we'll come on to return to office, but a while ago, you asked me a question about how do you create a culture where people can be open and honest to have those conversations.
Hmm.
With difficulty is my short answer.
Well, because I imagine, regardless of whether your organization has that openness or not, you're still primed by your previous experiences.
Mm.
So, where I've gone to organizations and they've said that, I have still got the whole legacy of all the other companies I've worked for priming me, going, yeah, but it's probably bullshit, isn't it?
I feel like Ted has an opinion there, talking about I can't even say it, anonymity of employee surveys. Yeah, but are they really anonymous? Are they really? And people just don't believe that they are, and they feel that they'll be penalised if they are open.
Well, and this is, yeah, like you've got to balance it between that, that survey approach, or do you have to redefine leadership essentially, or management or leadership to enable the conversation to happen? Because I don't believe that a survey is necessarily going to cut it to inform the end-to-end design of an employee experience that all your employees are going to love for various different reasons. I think it's a great starting point, but I don't think it's going to give you the totality of what you want. It's not going to give you that true understanding of how people are thinking and feeling.
Oh, I mean, I have so many things that I just want to say, and I want to say them all at once. So, trying to be very structured and logical here. I mean, the biggest thing that we go on about quite a lot is that user-centered design, starting off with user research and really, really trying to understand why people tick, what their motivations are, what they're thinking, feeling, and why they do what they do. Um, yes, surveys are a way to do that. Surveys give you the what, they don't really give you the why. So, I mean, for me, I prefer an interview about, oh, I'm so distracted by these comments. I need to not read them. Yeah, so surveys, they give you the what and not the why. And like the interviews, you can really dig into the why and really understand the motivation. But I think another really big thing is you're all right, Greg, don't worry. Another important thing is the go and see it. So I used to work in New Zealand for the Warehouse Group, which is the biggest retail company in New Zealand, but it's New Zealand. So it was only like 14,000
It's got
people
two
across
shops
14,000 employees, which by,
across two very big shops.
four. They had four brands. Anyway, irrelevant. But we got to go, like, so I worked in the learning design team, I worked in the head office, and we got to go to the warehouse distribution center and see how everything, worked, and really like kind of understand it. But it did feel a little bit like a tourist, like I just going for the day, and you could tell that we were definitely in the way of the people who were there. On the flip side, and I tried to Google this yesterday, so I might be misremembering, but I listened to a podcast last year with an interview with Richard Walker, who's the CEO of Iceland. I'm pretty sure it was him anyway. He said that he makes it mandatory for all staff to go on the shop floor and experience what it's like on the shop floor. So I say all staff, I mean all office staff, back office staff, so that you can go and understand what it's like. So that when you're designing things for your colleagues, when you're putting things in place for the people who serve your customers, you have that empathy and that understanding. Which, yeah, no, sorry, you go.
No, it makes complete sense. It makes complete sense. And having worked for a number of retailers, and us both having both worked in hospitality, I think when you are exposed to lots of different types of people in quite a short space of time, you get a great appreciation of the world. People I know that have worked in hospitality have seen the very best
And
and the
the very
very worst of
worst, yes.
humanity. The way some people act and behave in those situations is varied and sometimes despicable. But if you didn't work, or in the Iceland, if you didn't go on the shop floor, you would never know that type of person existed, and that was one of the things that would, someone might have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. If you sit in your echo chamber of like-minded individuals, to go back to our earlier point, then you only end up designing quite arbitrary things
That don't fit the user's need. And by the user, I mean your colleague here.
Mm.
the whole idea, I'm just going to give you a little bit of like history, if that's all right, for a
Yeah, yeah.
second. The whole idea of this, and it's Japanese. It comes from the Toyota production system, and I don't speak Japanese, but I think it's pronounced Genshi Genbutsu, but basically it literally means go and see it, I believe. And so it came from Toyota in the 60s, and the guy whose name I can't remember, but obviously Toyota, went out to America to go and see how people were using the product, the Sierra minivan, I believe. Do you know the one thing he discovered about how people use their minivans is that they need cup holders? And then from that, like they have drinks, they had nowhere to put their drinks. That's like the one thing he took away, probably more. And then from that, that's where all cup holders come from, because it was like really understanding that's what the user needs. They're looking for somewhere to put their drink. Like you're not going to find that out from a country halfway around the world. You have to go and see it to understand. And it is exactly the same sort of thing when it comes to working with people. Now, I know that there are complications, like your staff might not be happy about going to work on the shop floor. It's a change of job. Like there's obviously training kind of things that they might have to do. Um, training that they might have to do, all sorts of those kind of things. There might be logistical problems, but understanding your users is second to none when you're designing for them.
Interesting. Dara is a huge believer in shop floor presence as well. So yeah, I think kindred spirits there. I want to then just build on one of the points Greg makes as well. Like it's because the name of the stream, right, is from BrewDog to Blind Spots, and essentially, regardless of what James Watt has done, he's built himself this blind spot. And I think if you look into it, the reason why he's not CEO of BrewDog anymore, to his credit, by his own admission, probably wasn't the right person to lead that organization anymore. And I can probably agree with that, having talked to some people that work there and all the other stuff. But like, there is that element that his success has created this gap. And there's two things you can do. You can ignore the gap, or you might even not know that the gap exists. You might just be so blind to it that actually you don't even think there is a gap. You think you're still the same person you were 10, 15 years ago. So in that instance, the leader is directly failing their people because they are they essentially ignoring this then? Or are they just too busy doing other stuff?
I think they're probably too busy doing other stuff. And I think, like, I don't know if this is partly a legacy thing, what we think of as leaders as being, they have to make decisions. And ultimately, you can be a very conscientious leader. You'd be like, I've got the weight of the company on my shoulders. All of these people's livelihoods depend on me making good decisions, commercial, and having a commercially sustainable business. So you can put that pressure on yourself as well and be trying to do it for the right reasons. But if you don't prioritize listening to those around you and not just people who are on the same level as you, then I think it is a failure. Um, I think I was talking to someone a while ago about the idea of, servant leadership, which some people like, some people don't like, but like you are there to support the people that you're working with. You are there to make sure that they have what they need. But I will just counter on the flip side. Sometimes what you need is some rules, some structure, and a little bit of tough love.
Yeah. And I think where it's the relationship has to be mutually beneficial, right? So it can't be all one way and all the other, first and foremost. And well, it goes back to one of the sources of inspiration for us even talking about this kind of stuff anyway, and doing what Freeformers does is, as you know, our accountant lives near Bourneville. So every time I go and see him, I get off the train, I see the big Cadbury factory, and Bourneville, setting up Cadbury was essentially created Bourneville, the village, for his employees as a Quaker. Went out, did that, and gave his people what they needed to live their lives, essentially schools, hospitals,
Taught them to
houses, and all that
swim.
kind of stuff. Taught them to swim, and that village still exists today. So, Victorian factories in England possibly don't have the best reputation, but this one was doing some pretty nice stuff. But let's say that's one end of the extreme, right? Where you kind of go, I will literally take care of their entire livelihoods for them, to the point where you go to the other side and go, well, I will just treat people as a number, as a resource, and churn through them for my own benefit. I'm not saying either of those two is the ideal model. And in fact, what our data shows us is either of those probably aren't the ideal model. But what you want is to create this. Well, by design, it has to be a mutually beneficial relationship, but it has to have that conversation of a conversation understanding that I'm here, you're here, whoever's here for this end. I don't know where I was going with that. Sorry.
No, I'm not too sure either. I think what you're saying is that there has to be a balance, and that's what we've said right from the beginning, right? There has to be a balance, and we're not saying it has to be equal, because obviously there is an inbuilt hierarchy, but you have to take some element of what your people need into account. And like I said, sometimes that is tough love. Sometimes that is structures and rules. I just for a second want to bring up another story, another podcast I listened to again a long time ago. It was about a group of students from America who went hiking in Norway, and this is why I listened to it, because I love hiking. Back pre-children, I still love hiking, and I've been to Norway hiking, and it's beautiful. And they took it in turns to be the leader. They're studying leadership training. They took it in turns to be the leader each day, and obviously they have like their actual course leaders there. And then they're all like, oh yeah, I'm going to give these really motivational speeches and I'm going to really get people fired up to go. And then, you know what? They've got like a 20K hike through the mountains. It's tough. It's really tough. The first day, it took them like 18 hours or something insane like that. By the third day, they managed to get it down to 9 hours. And the reason they managed to do that is they put all these rules in place. They're like, okay, you can't just stop when you want to stop. You can only stop for water when we cross a river, for example. And they put all these rules in place, and that's what enabled people to keep going, because you need that structure around you. And the reason why I'm saying this is I just think there is a tendency to be over focused on feeling, over focused as a kind of a reaction to the dictatorial, this is how it's going to be. There's an over focus on feeling, and I think that it doesn't necessarily make for a better company at the same time.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. There are a lot of particularly HR people, L&D companies out there that focus purely on happiness and well-being, which I am never going to say they're not the right things to focus on. However, it sits on one very far end of a spectrum, where the other end of the spectrum is actually, I want to work as long and as hard as I can and all this kind of stuff, rather than, do you know what I mean? So there's like, we talk about that spectrum, right, from commerciality to humanity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, James Watt and Georgia Toffolo seem like they're on the commerciality scale, that they are, that time is money, so I'm working all the time. And then there's a humanity end of the scale, which is what I want to have the best experience for my people. I want them to be happy. And quite broadly, leaders in organizations act on that commerciality end, and HR works on this humanity end. And I think the problem is that they're polarizing viewpoints generally, and therefore you have to meet that stuff in the middle. Because if you don't, you can't just go around saying, "Oh, I want to make our people really happy," because you'll get one side of the business going, "Why?"
Well, that's another blind spot, right? Because also, if you're making your people happy, doing what they're telling you they want, that's not necessarily the same thing as what we need. You speak to any user researcher, that don't ask people what they want, because they don't know what they want, or they know what they think they want, but it's not what they need.
Definitely. And so that's interesting. So because I was thinking about, like, what I'm now consciously thinking of throughout this whole live stream is, like, how do you then do that at scale? Because to do it with a company of 30 people, our good friend Alan at Channel Assist, and what they're doing.
You're going to mention him every single live stream.
Did I mention him last week as well?
You did, yeah.
I won't do it next week, I promise. But, as a company of 50 people now, has that opportunity to create these lovely bespoke relationships with his employees. Is that possible at 100, 200, 300?
Not for one person, because the commerciality side of the scale as well, you've also got to run a business.
Yeah. So So then you've got to be able to live and breathe that concept through a HR department, right?
Or your managers. That's the other side as well. Your managers.
Who do you think's the most likely to do it?
That depends on the culture, and it depends and the expectation you set on them when they start, and all the other mundane stuff that you're asking them to do, and business essential stuff.
Interesting.
I think, honestly, generally, I mean, we talked about this last week, like a centralized HR team is fantastic for so many things, but there are points where it has to be distributed. You see it in the bigger companies, like you try and get the people involved, like hiring, for example, recruitment. The person leading the recruitment, you want it to be the person who's hiring the position for the team, right? You want it to be the manager, and then you support them in any way you can. And I think it should be the same way in terms of your team's development and understanding what they are going on. I've forgotten what we're actually talking about. If I'm entirely honest.
I think it was
the thinking, the feeling, understanding what's going on with your employees as well. You've got to support them and make it light touch and easy and not add any extra work.
But how? So I go back to one of the things you said earlier about the process stuff, right? That you need some of that process, but then I would say an atypical HR department tries to process itself out of that problem altogether. Like it just puts in so many guardrails that you kind of disable that opportunity for a manager to have that approach.
How so?
I think what tends to happen in, well, certainly the larger organizations and larger HR teams I've worked in, is that you just try to do everything in the most efficient way possible, mitigate the risk of having employees, and try to put in a policy to help manage that situation. I think there's that. Once you get to that point, like and then it's a ubiquitous policy across all people, you then can't have that, well, what can we do for you and what can you do for us conversation? Because what we can do for you, we're kind of bound by the policy that we have. So if I go back a couple of years, a company I interviewed for, they said, oh, we want you in the office 60% of the time. And I went, it's not going to happen. Not doing it. It's like, I can maybe do that, every other week or something like that, but I need this more. I need adaptability in this. This is what I'm here for. And they really wanted to work with me as well. They really wanted to work with me. And I said, cool, can you make it happen? They went, no. Why not? Because the policy had been defined that we couldn't do that. Even if it was for the right person, you couldn't change stuff.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think it's a slippery slope here. I do, and I don't know what the answer is so keen to hear what everybody else thinks in the comments. Like, can you just change a policy for one person? Like, surely that's not fair. And surely that comes down to their negotiating skills or how valuable they're perceived to be. And then we get into the same place with like salary, where some people are seen as worth more than others. I think if you have a rule that, yeah, I don't know. But at the same time, like if you want to be a little bit more flexible with your people, is it then you actually say to everybody, okay, it's 40%, and then you have to weigh up the pros and cons on your business? You know what I mean?
But I think that's the point, right? Is that if you have a policy in place, you don't weigh up the pros and cons. You just say you can't do it. That's the problem. Like there's no conversation about should we or shouldn't we. It's like, well, no, the answer is just no. That's the problem.
I feel like well-written policies can make things. I mean, I think you should have like manager discretion, and also it depends on the type of role, and that should be baked into the policy. Like if you're doing like you and I have both done training role where, oh look, you're out of the office delivering training on client side for 4 days a week, you're not going to be in the office 60% of the time, obviously. So yeah, and then you shouldn't have to come in on your 5th day because you've been traveling for 4 days or what have you. So I think there are some things you can put in there to make it fairer, but people really rankle at injustice, and if somebody has to be in 60% of the time and then they're seeing that you're not in 60% of the time, then that kind of, it breeds this it festers, doesn't it, a lot of the time.
It does. It does. And I think you're then and we're just saying the less policy in place, the better, in my opinion. But so I think the crucial thing here is probably not that there's two things. One, not a hard and fast rule for every single manager within the organization. I think that's probably key. But then the second point, the follow up, is like the co-design of that. So I am a leader, I am a manager, I have this autonomy to lead and run my team the way I see fit. And get the best out of my people. I, as a leader, should be the best person that has the intuition, the insight, and the conversations to enable that to happen. And where broad policy or strategy disables that from happening,
Yeah, that's
am I
fair.
empowered to flag that? Am I empowered to flag that? Probably not. So
Yeah.
it's probably more about disseminating this activity rather than being as HR being the gatekeepers of it.
Yeah, and I also think, so as Dara says, like, is the policy meant to deal with one bad actor or the organization as a whole? Like, get rid of somebody.
Yeah.
I hope she's not calling you a bad actor there.
I am a
But like,
terrible actor.
get rid of the policy where you can. I actually think we have so few policies, and I'm like, actually, we need a policy around this. And then it comes to like an agreement rather than a written policy, because it's just the two of us. I think that we're probably on the side of everybody here, and generally a few policies are important, and overall too many are bad because they stifle innovation.
Well, quite, and the fact that like there is legal compliance, right? There are some legally compliant things you have to do. I'm not saying get rid of those. That would be
Oh, good, because that would be a
ridiculous.
spicy take.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, legal compliance for organizations. Just throw it in the bin. Don't need it anymore. But yeah. Oh, Greg said he was going to shut up, and now he's back. So thank you for rejoining the conversation, Greg. Yeah, they're designed for wide-reaching purpose, and that wide-reaching purpose doesn't often work. Talking of which, because I know you wanted to talk about it, like return to the
Oh,
office.
it's just everywhere. It's just literally everywhere at the moment. Partly because maybe I shouldn't admit to this on a live stream, but I'm going to do it anyway. One thing I really like doing is reading Telegraph articles and reading about how people get so irate in the comments, and then just
Mhm.
feeling better about myself.
I
I
did
don't
not know this about you.
I
This is
know.
news to me.
I am a bit worried that I'm just going to get more and more right wing, which might be a problem. So if you notice me slipping, like, call me out on it. But yeah, no, people get so angry about the idea of people working from home, and then some people get so angry about the idea that the working from home is being taken away from them. And Greg, would just stop apologizing,
You're
please.
allowed to be in the comments. Comment away. It's good conversation.
But I also think that it shows a lack of empathy and a lack of thinking about broader than yourself. From the side of the business, so people mandating you have to be back in the office 5 days a week, that is completely tone deaf.
Mhm.
But also, I would argue, and I recognize that I also come from a place of privilege, because obviously we do work from home most of the time, something to do with the 3 hour drive, 4 hour drive between us,
Mhm.
that the people who say, I want to work from home, I am more productive when I work from home, don't really recognize the impact on everybody around them.
Mhm.
And that some people can't work from home. I think of some of the like really, really horrendous places I have lived, with like no natural light and a dead pigeon being the only thing between me and the next window of the next big block of flats. Like, you couldn't work from home in a place like that.
Yeah.
And I think it just shows a lack of empathy on all sides, and particularly when you've got managers who are like, I want to work from home because it's better for my family balance, which is, I totally understand that. I do understand it. Like, I've got kids, I get it. But at the same time, you've got to think of the organization as a whole, and that is a challenge. And I was talking about this with my husband over lunch. He's like, we should just do it 2 days a week. Everyone should be in 2 days a week, because apparently there's some evidence from the ONS. But I will just say that data can be cherry picked, and the Telegraph, they're always picking the ONS data to say that people are not more productive. So there you go.
But it's even that in its very nature is like almost too prescriptive, because it's like, again, at a team level, design what that cadence is
Yeah.
as a team. Like, when should we all be in the office together? And how long are we going to be in the office? And what are we going to do at that time? Like, to build that structure in. And it doesn't, the thing that baffles me, it has to be done on a weekly basis as well. Like,
Well, it's the easiest way to measure it.
you could do it monthly, bi-weekly. It's
I
just
have
weekly.
Okay, side note, stop saying bi-weekly because it's fortnitly, okay? Because bi-weekly means both twice a week and once every 2 weeks.
I love being ambiguous, you know me.
Oh.
It's harder to pick holes in anything I say if I'm ambiguous. Fortnightly, monthly, like, but putting a metric on it is kind of not really acknowledging the issue, in that there are some moments, well, some people love working from home and some people love working in office, need to work in an office. You know, there's that balance. But also for the element of what you're doing as a team,
Yeah.
when do you need to be in person and not in person, right? And designing that structure. Now, the thing that doesn't make sense, my wife included, come to the office and then everyone's on calls all day in the office.
Oh, I know. Tell me
Absolutely
about it.
makes no sense, right? So in that instance, you're forcing someone to go into the office, or a group of people to go to the office, for zero benefit. That I fundamentally disagree with. And so when you say 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, you're kind of saying, sorry, especially if it's 5 days a week, you're saying all these calls that you do, unless you're just talking to people in the organization, all these calls you're going to do, you're just going to sit in banks of desks and do these calls. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So I think it goes to that element of getting leaders to craft that with their teams. And I'm going to cough again.
Thanks for the heads up.
I muted myself that time.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I think it's got to be on a team by team basis. But I also do understand leaders who are mandating it to then, because otherwise you've got that unfairness between teams. Yeah, and when outputs instead of input, presence for no value. Definitely instead of presence for no value, but outcomes are hard to measure, as we touched on earlier, like they really are. And also, input is important, I think. Like, inputs, like the whole reason you come together, like what do we do when we come together in person, right? We talk about strategy, we talk about product development, all those things that are so much harder to do when you're on the end of a screen. So I think the inputs have to be really important, like you said, the work that you're going to do. But I really do get people who are saying it from a point of fairness. What I cannot stand is the people who are just like, this is how it was back in my day, and this equals productivity, because that is just presenteeism. And you and I both used to work for a company that said we had to be in the office till 6. And I frequently remember I'd finished at 5:30, but I felt like I couldn't go home. I was like, I've got nothing to do. I mean, the company did struggle financially after that. Because they didn't have enough work. But literally, I did not have the work to do. And I was sitting there twiddling my thumbs, trying to look busy until 6. And then I could go an hour commute home, or 45 minutes, wherever it was.
Well, as someone who worked with you, you did a very good job of making yourself look busy, because I never noticed that you were just
Well, it wasn't that often, but it definitely happened more than once. But I felt like I couldn't go home. You know, I felt like I had to be there.
Who sets that tone?
Huh. Well, you get it in your contract, don't you? And unless it is explicitly stated otherwise. So I'm pretty sure our contract said you have to be work from 9:30 till 6, I think it was. I think that's what it said. Yeah, you have to be there 9:30 till 6. And then it was an open plan office, and everyone they could see you, right? And they could hear you. And then it was really obvious if you left early. And then there's that pressure. And part of it is what we've grown up with. And I wonder if it will change, especially with like COVID and all of that. And working from home. But unless it's managed differently and you've agreed it with your manager, and I think there's a little bit of anonymity in bigger places. When I worked in New Zealand, I did leave. Like, I remember I left for appointments in the middle of the day and came back, and it was fine because like it's such a massive place that no one, you're just another person, right? Rather than in like a tiny 30-person office.
And I suppose it goes back to the very start of this live stream and talking about that work-life balance, right? In the if you determine that there are some jobs that obviously require you to be in a place of work at a time, like hairdressers
A teacher.
or a teacher, right? So like, those aside, where there's kind of that immovable object, is like, are you able? Well, do you believe that if you treat people like adults, they will perform and be happier as a result? I have
Lots
to
of
believe
people
yes,
don't.
but
Well, lots of people don't. Like, you see it. There's a lot of like, there'll always be people who take the system for a ride, right? There will always be people who game the system,
yeah.
but I think that they are a small minority.
Well, and I can't remember who put the comment there, but like, is the policy there just for?
Yeah,
That was
Dara.
Dara, right? The one bad actor. So yeah, that's kind of like the lowest common denominator. We need to solve for that at the detriment to everybody else. But I still think that goes back to leadership, right? And them having those nuanced. I mean, if you've got someone acting like that in your organization, essentially what you're putting the policy there in place is to give you a reason to get rid of them. That's kind of what you're
Yeah,
doing. It's like, oh,
yeah,
you're not playing the way we want you to play. So I have created this policy so I can massage you out the business. And
yeah.
I get it because it's the easiest thing to do. I'm not saying it's necessarily the right thing to do, but then also you've got to question your hiring choice at the beginning. Now, obviously, people will project a different persona in CVs and interviews and all that kind of stuff. But there was a really interesting post by Ken Corey today, in fact, that said like a probation based recruitment model could potentially save you money. I meant to tag you in the post and I didn't, so I'm going to go back and find it and tag you in it. But like, in the same way we see it, right, is probation is still part of that recruitment phase, like for both parties. It's not just about can you pass probation. It's like, does this work for us?
Mm.
Like that's where you want to go. Does it work for you? Does it work for us? And can we both get what we want out of this? Because if we can't, then we may as well end that relationship. But it's generally not seen like that. It's seen as something you have to pass, this hurdle you have to overcome, you have to prove yourself, and then you get past it and you can relax a little bit. Take your foot off the gas. But it doesn't really. But it doesn't
No
really
one,
make sense.
just to say though, nobody, very few people are going to say at probation point, 12 weeks, whatever, 6 months, this isn't working for me, so I need to leave
Mm,
without having another job lined up. And
yes.
having another job lined up is very hard. So I think you could have that conversation, but I don't think someone's going to be honest because you don't want to lose a job if you don't have another one to go to because
Yeah.
financial security.
Well, and this is. I think this is probably a whole nother live stream because I know we're kind of out of time. But like the way an employee leaves an organization can they can either be a promoter or a detractor of your organization as a result. And I truly believe for every way someone will leave your company, there's probably a way to spin it into a positive than it always being overtly negative. Now, there are some instances where it will just be negative. For example, if they committed a crime. But there are those opportunities to redesign it. And I think, again, you design from policy and process, you get into a place where
Yes.
you start creating something which just pisses people off, you know, and especially when I was in large organizations, it was a well-known fact in those large organizations that consultation happened pretty much every year. It was like a routine thing. Like end of financial year would come, everyone would be put through consultation, and it was like it just ended up being this very inhumane way of treating and managing a workforce. Now that business has since ditched those practices, but it just goes to that point where it's like if you're a process driven
You
company that works
forget
with
the
people,
people.
yeah.
Yeah, you can't forget the people. People make the world go round.
Oh, and that is a lovely way to end the live stream. It's all about the people, and people make the world go round, as does money.
And
Um,
technically, I think gravity as well. But hey,
is it gravity that makes the world go round?
oh, don't. I'm not. I'm a very clever person, but I don't know much about physics. Moving on.
I don't either. Well, thank you for joining me. I mean, I don't want to say thank you. This is our co-hosted live stream. Well, thank you to everyone joining us. We had Joe, we had Anwin, we had Greg, we had Dara, we had Greg, and then we had Sean, and then we had Ted join as well.
And
Thank
Greg, we
you.
love it. We love your contributions. Keep them coming.
Yes, and we love your podcast as well. It's a great podcast. So with that, we wish you an enjoyable rest of your Wednesday. We will see you here, same time, same place, because I said here. Next week, I haven't figured out what our title's going to be, but I'll come up with one in the meantime. So with that, we wish you a lovely afternoon. Bye.